Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. So today I'm very excited to shoot this video because I'm joined by my wife Ayushman, and we are going to discuss about budget, not our household budget, but the nation's budget. And what specifically are we going to speak about? So number one, we are going to touch upon the basics of budget. What is it that a common citizen should understand, some of the key points why they should even bother about this document. Second key thing, we are going to discuss about 2023 budget expectations. What are some good, bad stuff that might happen? Third and finally, we are going to talk about the market scenario and the impact on budget on the stock markets. Now, you might have a natural response by this quick introduction that you are trying to spread nepotism on YouTube, inviting your family members, this, that. So over to Ayushi to speak about her qualifications, and then we will jump into the topic.
Hi everyone, I'm Ayushi. I'm an Indian Economic Service Officer and I've worked with the Ministry of Finance for the last 7 years. I have worked on various budgets, so that gives me one qualification. I've also done my economics honors from SRCC and then my masters in economics. Subsequently, I also worked with the Planning Commission of India. So these are my qualifications. And on today's video, we are going to discuss about budget 2023 and what can we expect out of it.
Okay, awesome. So you have boasted really well. Okay. On that note, side topic, who is your favorite YouTuber?
Very difficult question. There are so many. But I think my favorite YouTuber is someone whose name starts with A and ends with T.
Okay, so it's Ankit. I don't know who that is, but okay, let's move on. Okay, so let's quickly start the topic. So first and foremost, what exactly is budget? Why is it needed? If you can throw some light on that.
Very simply put, budget is a roadmap for any country. It shows what are the income sources and where are we going to spend that money. To contextualize at an individual level, we get our salaries and we have to decide how to spend that money. Similarly, at a national level, budget is something which is prepared by the government to decide how much revenue are they getting and where exactly do they want to spend that money.
Okay, so there are essentially 2-3 parts, if I understand it correctly. So one is that, they are going to speak about how much money they have made, right? And where are they going to spend it? Which specific states are going to get how much money? Is that also covered? So if you can just quickly touch upon some fundamental points on budget, what mota is covered in budget?
Budget will talk about revenue sources, whether it is from tax revenues or other revenue sources, which we'll discuss later in the video. Then it discusses about what are the expenditure. For example, how much money is to be spent on schemes, how much money is to be spent on welfare of people, how much money will go towards defense, health, education, and different sectors. So these are broadly the two categories which are covered in the budget. Then of course there are something outcomes and outputs also. For example, the schemes which are implemented earlier, what is the outcome achieved out of that? So
in that context, a few key questions come to my mind as a common citizen that, this looks like an academic exercise that, itna halla machta hai, budget is going to get presented, people get super excited, news channels discuss all this stuff. But these decisions can also be made throughout the year by the government, right? And they might be making it. So then why is it that we need or get so excited about this document called as budget?
That's a very good question. And the simple answer is that, yes, of course, decisions are taken throughout the year also. But to take those decisions, we need to have a vision. And budget is that vision document for 1 year. It gives a roadmap on where are we intending the country to head to. Depending on the need and contextualization, of course, decisions are taken throughout the year. Some schemes may be introduced, some announcements may be made by the government. But to have that long-term vision document on where exactly are we heading and how are we going to utilize the money that we have got so far, we need a budget document at the starting of the year.
So if I have to contextualize it to me, so for example, if I'm making, let's say, salary of 1 lakh rupees, right? I will write it on an Excel spreadsheet or with pen and paper, ki acha, 1 lakh salary mil rahi hai. I'm going to spend like 50,000 rupees on my rent, 30,000 here, there, everywhere. So I have a mota idea and I get that that is what budget also means at a national level. This is what any common person would be thinking. Now comes the natural question that are there like punishments associated with not meeting these goals? That if you say on the budget that, okay, we are going to spend X% money in healthcare, Y% money in education, we'll give you to these 4 or 5 states. If those things are not met, then is there any punishment mechanism associated with it?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. And let me just introduce a very small concept here, which is called as politics. So economics and politics go together. Now, budgets are something which are prepared by the government in power at that particular time. So punishments, if you say that if there are any punishments or if the politicians are made accountable, yes, they are through the elections that they have to contest later on. But with respect to whether they are meeting the targets or not, there are no particular punishments as such. This will be dictated by what are the final outcomes of the budget, which are introduced in the next year's economic survey, which gives a very broad picture of what was projected and how much of it have we met. So no punishments as such, but yes, definitely, though economic survey will give you an overall scenario of how far we have come from the budget that we had anticipated.
Okay, so very quickly breaking down. So budget is a separate document, economic survey is a separate document. Go and read both the documents in case you get time. It's a little bit nerdy intellectual. In case you don't want to do it, do comment below. We will make another video on budget updates and economic survey updates, and we will present it to you in simple language. But please understand that budget is a separate roadmap type of a document. Economic survey is an economic analysis of whatever has happened in the last year.
Absolutely correct. Economic survey is introduced on 31st of January, which is today, and budget is introduced on 1st of February for the next year. So budget document is a forecast. Economic survey is like the report card of your economy.
Got it. Now comes a very, I was looking at the data, and I'll present the data for our audience here also. It is always said that the budget, we always exist in deficit. So just to understand the economic equation here, that will be profit is equal to revenues minus cost. So from that perspective, we are always in minus. So what is the meaning of this deficit, that we always exist in deficit, and is it something that we should worry about?
So this is a common misconception that deficits are bad. Deficits may not always be bad till the time we are spending the money to productive uses. For example, if we are constructing a dam, we have got some income and we're constructing a dam out of it, we borrowed some money and we spent more than that we anticipated, more than the income we had. But for the construction of that dam, we employed a large number of people, we gave them wages, they fed their families, they could educate their children, they could provide for healthcare for their children. This means that overall, the well-being of the nation is increasing. If, for example, we are spending that income that we got on non-productive uses, for example, maybe just digging a hole and filling it back, this will not be counted as good deficit because, it is not creating any wages, it is not increasing the overall well-being of the citizens. So deficit per se may not be bad. It really depends on how you are spending that money.
So in economic terms, we can segregate this into productive use of capital versus unproductive use of capital. Yes. So as long as even if we are creating a deficit on the budget, deficit means कि minus में चलना चीज़ों का, that you have taken loan and things are, loan is piling up, that is called as creating a deficit. But if you're taking that loan in order to create productive capital, right, and productive things, then probably it's fine. But if you're doing it for unproductive purposes, then it is bad. So is my understanding correct?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Very quickly plugging in the sponsors for today because घर में 4 पैसे आएंगे, right? So from that angle, so today's sponsor is Smallcase, and many people are worried about the entire volatility that is happening in the stock market. So Smallcase is a wonderful platform for you to do your investing. So there is a very interesting small case. It is called as all-weather investing small case. So this small case helps you hedge your risk by investing across equities, which are stocks, bonds, debt, and gold. So you can go and check it out. I will also link some of my favorite small cases in the description and comment box. So do go and definitely check it out. Section 2 is that we will just quickly touch upon some of the key considerations in 2023 budget. People are speaking a lot that, hey, will it be a good budget, bad budget? Oppositions will definitely criticize, and even before the budget getting released, it becomes a bad budget. Similarly, the supporting parties will say that it's a good budget, irrespective of whatever happens. So how would you categorize a good versus bad budget? If we can quickly touch upon the semantics around it.
So irrespective of what political parties think, let's not go into that debate. Good budget is something which helps in the long-term growth of the country. As simple as that. Bad budget is something which does not. So I would ask you this question. As a common citizen, what is something that you expect out of a budget?
Zero tax.
Okay, that may not be possible, but yeah, to be a little more practical.
Right. So now I would rather take a pause here, and I'll just quickly touch upon the concept of being a popular budget. So you said that, if the budget makes people happy, that is a good budget. I don't necessarily agree with that, because by that logic, zero tax kar diya and everyone will be very happy, but that probably would not make sense. So probably touching upon there, right, we can unfold this thread that if zero taxation happens on budget, then what would it lead to, right? I mean, is that possible? Can it theoretically be done? How would the system work like?
Till the time there are governments, I do not think that zero tax is possible, because governments have been constituted to fulfill certain obligations to the society, right? And in any society, there are different income levels, there are different status of society. So budgets, or if we make it completely zero tax, just consider that, situation where there is no tax at all, then there is no need for the government also. How are they going to spend the money?
I would rather have a slightly different viewpoint here. So there are some countries where there is zero taxation or almost close to zero taxation. For example, Middle Eastern countries, they have a lot of resources. So zero taxation is possible there. For example, Monaco, where there are financial hubs and there is close to 0% taxation. So very quickly putting on the chart where the Indian government is making money. And from this, I can see that almost 95% or 95% comes from our tax revenues and 5% comes from non-tax revenues. So is there a possibility that government can make money without taxing people too much? Can't that be done? Or at least this mix can be improved, right? Maybe we'll not go to zero taxation, but we can get to a point where non-tax revenues from the government, if they are effectively managing their business, it goes up to 20-30%. Is that a possibility?
Just to contextualize, 90-95% may be incorrect.
Yeah.
60% of the money that is spent comes from tax revenues and 5% comes from non-tax revenues. So there is a difference between tax and non-tax. Then 35% is from borrowings. That is borrowed maybe from outside institutions or through the private markets. So 60% is through tax revenues. To contextualize, you talked about countries like UAE, where there is almost zero taxation. It is not comparable to situation in India. And why is that? Because UAE is a resource-rich country that you correctly pointed out. It is rich in oil, it is rich in petroleum reserves, which it can export to generate more revenues. And those revenues can be utilized for the welfare of the people. Absolutely correct. But that cannot be compared to situation in India, because India has a huge population, income inequality is very high, there are different income levels, and we need to cater to all kinds of population. So we are not a resource-rich country. We have to generate revenues through other sources. And how can we do that? Through productive capital formation.
Right, so that's a fancy economic word, productive capital formation. So if you can break it down, what exactly is that means by giving a few examples?
Productive capital formation can be investing in the skills and education of our population, of people. We do have one resource which is called as demographic dividend, another fancy economic term, which means that we have a large younger segment of the population who is just entering into the workforce. So if we invest in their skills, in their capabilities, and we make them capable enough to work harder, to generate more income for the economy, this will create a long-term growth trajectory for the country.
Understood. So now the natural question comes that if I am a young person in India, right, and you spoke about demographic dividend, then one of the key things that I would worry about is the taxation, right? Because at least the numbers that I'm seeing, and I'll put it up for people also, that if you take a look at the effective tax rate in India, it is typically going up for the last 25 odd years, irrespective of whichever government has been in the power. And that's one. And even the indirect taxes have been going up in India. So people pay a large part of their income, or paying higher part of their income in form of direct income taxes. And also if they're just going and buying stuff in the Indian economy, they are paying taxes on top of that. So taxation structure is very high, that's A. Second is that the high paying jobs in India are not that high, which is bad. So how do you think that budget can counter this problem? What are the areas it should focus on?
Tax rationalization is something which every budget every year should cover. And this is something which has been debated in the public also for quite some time. This is something that this year's budget should also cover to a very large extent. And I do not know the budget, to be very, very honest. I do not know the document. I haven't read it. I don't know anything about it. This is something which we need to focus on in order to ensure that the people who are entering the workforce are not bogged down by the taxes that they're putting.
But that's a good speech. We keep on hearing these speeches from a lot of people from the government. No offense, right, from that perspective. I can say it. I'm not working with the government. But having said this, is there a way, right? I mean, can you tell like specific steps that point 1, 2, 3, this can be done, that will somehow at least start addressing the problems that I just spoke about of high taxation or taxation going higher, and people not having high impact jobs or high paying jobs?
Let me introduce a very small economic concept here, which is called as the Laffer curve. Now, for those who have studied economics, they might already be aware of it, but Laffer curve basically gives the argument that a lower tax rate actually increases the tax revenues for the government. This means that there are less of tax avoidance and people do not evade taxes at all. So lower tax rates are proven to be beneficial for any government. With that context in mind, I think there are certain measures that can be introduced by the government in order to ensure that more taxes are collected and there is more equitable distribution of this tax structure. It could be maybe increasing the exemption limit. It could be increasing the income tax slabs, or it could also be introducing some kind of taxes specifically for those who are engaged. This is going to be a very debatable point at home later on, but some kind of taxes for the high net worth individuals and maybe lowering the tax structures for those who are in the middle class.
So here is an interesting data point that I would like to show you. This talks about the wealth gap in India and how it has progressed over time. So for example, in 1961 to 1970, the share of bottom 50% was approximately 12.5% wealth. It has come down to literally half. 6.12% of entire wealth in India is owned by bottom 50%. Rest, approximately 94% of wealth is owned by top 11%. So in context of this rich-poor divide, you were saying that, hey, the mechanism should be built where middle class is taxed less, right? Okay. If middle class is taxed less, then the people who are at the bottom strata of the society, they probably can't afford to pay taxes, right? They would not have discretionary income. Then you can go and charge the rich. Then again, the capitalistic debate comes into the picture that if you're charging the rich who are building businesses, providing a lot of employment, they would have option of shifting their business from India to some other country. So how is that a practical solution?
That is absolutely correct. And there is no right or wrong answer to this. When Warren Buffett said that he pays lesser tax than his secretary, this is actually a debate which is going on across the countries all over the globe. So this is something which has no right or wrong answer. But in order to ensure that a larger base of population is covered who are willing to pay taxes, we need to ensure some kind of tax rationalization. So for example, we must ensure that we widen the tax base. That means that we cover a larger segment of the population who are willing to pay taxes on their own. Now, to do this, we need to again rationalize the taxes. The second point is that...
So what do you mean by rationalizing the taxes? Right? I'm not a taxation expert. So if you can break it down for me, कि भाई ये 3-4 चीजें होनी चाहिए जिससे tax structure becomes simplified. So what would that be?
For example, introducing more tax slabs could be one alternative. For example, right now in the new tax regime, anyone who's earning more than 10 lakhs per annum has to pay 30% tax. So instead of that, you introduce another tax slab, say of 15% or 20% at 10 lakh income level. And then at 15 income lakh level, you introduce another tax slab and just keep on increasing it. So that means that depending on your income level, you introduce more tax slabs. So this could be one example. The second point is introducing some kind of tax incentives for smaller businesses and not only focusing on the big businesses which are already established. Why is that important? Because smaller businesses are the ones which have been proven to employ more people. So India is a developing economy. India has been called a startup economy. So incentivizing these startups to actually grow and employ more people can benefit and can improve the welfare of all its citizens.
Achha, so all these things I understand, these are like, statements I anyways keep on reading, this, that, right? So they are diplomatic stuff. Achha, tell me like one thing, this is a thought exercise, even I don't know about this, whether it can be done or not. But in terms of filing taxations, right? I mean, if you're a small business owner, first and foremost, track your GST, then file your GST, then file your income tax, pay advance tax. There's like so much complication just filing it. So why can't government just take money from my account, right? And especially like to salaried people, right? I mean, if you're getting a salary, they can easily compute how much money you're making. So why can't these type of steps be done?
Now, this is a very debatable question because if the government does that, then it will start another round of debates. So this is not something that the government does. The government trusts its firms, its businesses to actually disclose their income and to pay taxes accordingly.
Okay.
It does not, because businesses are very cyclical. You do not know how much income is a business.
But for salaried people, it can be done. No?
It is being done already. For example, I am a salaried person and my tax is deducted right before we get the salary.
That is tedious, but you still have to file income tax at the end of the year, no?
Yeah, because there are other investments that I might be making, that there are other instruments I might have purchased, there are other assets I might have purchased. So government trusts me to, disclose my assets. And if I have made any kind of capital gains on those assets, I must disclose it to the government and pay taxes accordingly.
But again, quick thought exercise, right? A lot of people, for example, there are 80C, 80D deductions, etc., etc. They might not be participating in that, right? And there are benefits in terms of participating, in terms of taking these benefits. Now, people don't do it because of awareness issues, they are a little bit scared, all that. So if a system can be built and automated, and I'm just brainstorming, I'm not trying to prove that this can be done, cannot be done. I'm just spitballing here, trying to think aloud that why can't a structure be created that if a person who is making 10 lakh fixed income why can't the government help them, right, in terms of automating everything? कि आपको tax भरना भी नहीं है, right? Automatically money will be deducted. Automatically, these things can be optimized. Send reminder from the government's end. So can't such an automated system be created?
Okay, the first thing that we need to identify, if a person is getting 10 lakh income, how will we identify what are the income sources?
It can't be done.
No, it can't be done. No, there can be multiple sources of income. For example, I might be earning my salary, I might be getting rent from some property, I might have made some capital gains in the stock market. So dividing that income sources into different streams is very difficult for each individual. The second is that not everybody has a bank account yet. That means that not all the income is coming into the bank account. So the government cannot trace how exactly and where exactly are people getting the income from. Right. So these are some of the practical difficulties, and therefore that kind of a structure may not be feasible at this stage.
Right. So quickly summarizing, so basically the thing is that an automated system looks wonderful because it saves people a lot of time. I really value time, so I wish that such a system could have been built. But to cut the long story short, the problem here is that people can have diverse sources of income, sometimes multiple clubbed together. So that nature of income, unless it can be established, such an automated system can't be created for a very large populace. So that becomes like a little bit of a challenging issue. But I would encourage all CAs who are watching this or people who work with the IT department to come up with some kind of system which can help us save time. So that would always be a push because it will make the systems more effective in terms of saving time. So, okay, moving on, the expectations from the budget. So I was reading, so there are 4 or 5 key expectations. One is around fiscal prudence. So this is a term that keeps coming up. So can you quickly help us understand what fiscal prudence means?
Fiscal prudence basically means that whatever income you're getting, you're spending it in a wise manner, in a productive manner, which helps in the long-term growth of the country.
Right. So that indirectly ties into that how much revenues you are making, and in relation to that, how much debt you are incurring or taking, plus how much expenditures you are making.
And how you're spending that debt, and where exactly are you spending that money.
Right.
So for example, capital expenditure is a good thing. Where exactly you're putting that money is very, very important.
Okay, so the second point is around short-term capital gains tax and long-term capital gains tax. It was introduced in the equities market in 2018 and the stock market corrected quite aggressively. It created a lot of pain for investors. So looking at the current dynamics in the market, especially around stock market, that it has been very volatile. It hasn't given much returns over the last 1.5 years. Do you see it going up, down? What is it that your personal viewpoint here would be, not the professional viewpoint?
So short-term capital gains tax has been there for quite some time, and LTCG, the long-term capital gains tax, was introduced quite recently. Now whether it should be increased or decreased, I can't really comment. It really depends on individual to individual basis, and of course everybody would want it to be decreased, but it is something which does definitely affect the market sentiments and can result in volatility in the market. And of course, Akshat can comment more on it, how animal spirits or market sentiments are affected by what the government introduces in its budget.
Sure. So we'll do like an analysis of the budget on stock market tomorrow. And if you want the ma'am to be here, please comment and like this video. Let's move on to third point, which is around populist budget. And there has been talks, and this seems like a rational talk to me, that the exemption limits in terms of claiming deductions hasn't been increased for the last 10 years, but inflation has gone up quite aggressively. So do you think that these type of exemption limits should be increased? It helps the middle class definitely.
Yes, in my personal opinion, it should be increased. Standard deduction, for example, for salaried individuals was introduced up to rupees 50,000. So that was a good act, and it was introduced a few years back. So it has been quite some time, and even the tax slabs have not been changed to a very large extent for the last 6 to 8 odd years. So I think this is something that can be looked into in this year's budget.
So the next point that is being talked about is the PLI spent and the PLI scheme, production linked incentive scheme. So how it has transpired, if you have been tracking it, the PLI data, and do you think that this is something that the government should look more closely into and offer more support on the PLI front?
Yeah, absolutely. PLI scheme was introduced to boost domestic manufacturing, and it has been introduced across sectors. For example, in manufacturing, electronics, defense, and so on and so forth. So PLI scheme has proven to a very large extent to be effective in improving the domestic manufacturing, and especially after the pandemic we have seen, we cannot be dependent on external markets, on markets outside India. So this is something that should be looked into and should be further bolstered for the country.
Right. Related point here would be as to how you can use this information to make money. So right now, consumer durable stocks have gotten a lot of appetite. They haven't gone up for the last 1.5 to 2 odd years. Small cap, mid caps haven't really gone up to the extent large caps have gone up. These are not stock buying recommendations. I'm just telling you how PLI can impact all these different categories, consumer durables, small and mid cap, because a lot of that layer of manufacturing happens in India. Okay, final point regarding the disinvestment target. So this is being talked about quite aggressively, that Indian government has done a good job in terms of meeting its disinvestment target, or at least accelerating that. Do you see like more work being done on this front, and what type of budget announcements can happen on these lines?
This is something which the government has been working on for the last few years, and it has been trying to come out of those sectors where it is actually not needed. And in my personal opinion also, this is something which is very, very essential, because this saves a lot of money for the country and it saves a lot of our taxpayers' money. So disinvestment targets are there already. Some of it has already started. The work is already being done in the government, and this will continue to go on for the next few years as well.
Right. So before closing out, final thoughts on how the budget could impact the stock market. So number one, it's a very, very important budget. A lot is riding on it. It's a pre-election year, so that again becomes very important. Number two, I really hope that the government spends a lot of money in terms of doing capital productive spend, not on in terms of boasting like populist measures per se. That is not targeted towards any party, but just generally speaking, that is what good for the economy would be. Any other final points that you would like to add, that what type of budget can help India?
So just 2-3 key points, and I'll summarize what we discussed here. Tax rationalization is very important because it ensures that we have a wider net of population who are actually paying the taxes, and the onus of paying taxes does not fall on only one segment of the population. Second is spending money on capital formation, that is investing in humans, in human skills, in human education, in healthcare, and also spending in productive capital assets formation, for example dams, roads. That is something that is required for infrastructure development. And finally, the third important point is rationalization of subsidies, and I think we did not cover it in extensive in this video. That means that reducing and rationalizing the amount of subsidy that is given out to different segments of the population. This is something which we can discuss later on in subsequent videos also. But yeah, these are the 3 basic points that the budget should be looking into.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. And if you want us to cover budget more holistically in a fun manner, in a light-hearted manner, and still learn a lot, do comment, like this video, share it with your friends. Then we'll be happy to come tomorrow and discuss our viewpoint on what budget 2023 looks like and what it means for the common citizen. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next.